car parking directly in front of my house. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. The city is setting up outside my house. Well, good thing I'm almost done. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Danny, and today I'm going to be talking about things no one tells you about massive weight loss. So today I am here in my garage gym. I don't know if you can see it. We got squat racks, we got dumbbells. I'm very happy to have this home gym given the current lockdown situation. But given that we're all on lockdown, I think everybody has had a lot of time to think lately, and I am not an exception to that. So I've been thinking lately about my whole journey from like getting into fitness to where I am now, and it got me thinking about that huge period of this journey. And it wasn't huge time-wise, but it was probably the most important part of this journey was way back when I was about 19 or 20 years old, and I lost 90 pounds in a relatively short period of time. And just thinking about how I'm such a different person today than I was then, and looking back at that young girl and thinking about all the things she didn't know. I think most people can look back at themselves and remember a time when they were pretty clueless. And when I was going through that period of losing all that weight, I was pretty clueless, and I just wish that I could go back and tell myself all the things that I know now. But some of those things are specifically about that weight loss journey and what I thought it was gonna mean and what it actually means. And I wanted to talk to you guys about that today. Now, most of Vegan Protein's clients are people who are already fairly athletic, but we do have a fair amount of people who are just setting out on their journey. Some people just, wanting to lose 20 pounds or build some muscle, and some people with quite a bit of weight that they'd like to lose. And I often find that they have a lot of the preconceived misconceptions that I did, and I'm happy to help them, and hopefully somebody watching this can be helpful for them too. Okay, so the first thing that I think is important to know about a big weight loss journey is, much like myself, you're probably going to be kind of clueless. You're not really gonna know what you're doing when you're going through this. And I think that's one of the hardest things about going through it, is that you're very unsure about what it is you're doing. Like, are you doing the right things? Should you be doing more? Are you eating the right foods? Are you eating enough foods? You're just never 100% certain of anything. The only real feedback, especially if you're going at it alone, is like the scale or your measurements. Are they improving? And you're probably doing something right. But I feel like that unknowing sense of just uncertainty as you're going through it can make you feel really alone. And I think that unless you have like a professional looking over your shoulder, almost everybody who goes through this is pretty clueless as to if they're doing the right or wrong things. When I look back now, I did so many things wrong. Like I reached the end result that I wanted to, kind of, and I'll get to that in a minute. But if I could go back and do it again, I would do so many things differently. And I think that even now, 13, 14 years later, I think I would be in a different place now if I had done things differently then. And that's a hard pill to swallow. But there's more than one way to reach a goal. And I think that's really important. But if you're feeling uncertain, I think that's a normal thing to feel. The next thing nobody told me about massive weight loss is that people are going to talk about your body. And this was so weird to me, because growing up overweight and eventually very overweight, people don't talk about your body. In society, in general, most people would say it's rude to talk about large people's bodies. Now, I personally at this point in my life think it's rude to talk about anybody's body. You shouldn't comment on anybody's body. But as a society, we've pretty much agreed you don't talk about big people's bodies. So as you start to lose weight, suddenly your body becomes a topic of conversation in a room full of people, and it can be really uncomfortable when you have literally spent your entire life trying to not stick out, just trying to blend in, trying to not be the center of attention. And suddenly, not only are you the center of attention, but you're talking about something that makes you really uncomfortable. So that is something to be prepared for and kind of know how to navigate it. And you need to build a little bit of a thick skin, because if you're anything like I was, you're probably pretty sensitive about your body in the first place. And somebody might say something that sounds like it was well-meaning, but it kind of insults you, or vice versa. Sometimes people just say insulting things, like they're insulting who you were. And that's pretty screwed up. But as a nation, and probably as a world, I think we have pretty screwed up views of weight loss and body image and things like that. So it doesn't surprise me now that that's how people act, but at the time it really surprised me and I thought it was inappropriate then. And I still think it's inappropriate now. So the takeaway from this is don't comment on people's bodies. Don't comment when people gain weight. Don't comment when they lose weight. Even saying like, wow, you lost a lot of weight. You look great. That sounds like it should be a compliment, right? And I think in certain situations it can be a compliment, but a lot of the times it's like, you look great, but you didn't look great before, is kind of the connotation to that. Now that I compete in bodybuilding, my body goes through up and down fluctuations all the time. That's part of the sport. And now I'm kind of used to it, but I still think that it's a really inappropriate thing to say. When I'm getting ready for a show, it goes one of two ways. It's either like, wow, you look so great, you're so lean, or like, don't get too thin. And then after a show, when I put on some much needed body fat again, it's be like, oh, you look so much healthier now. Or kind of like the tiptoeing around like, oh, she let herself go. And all of it is weird. Just don't comment on people's bodies. This next one is still a hard pill for me to swallow almost 15 years later, is that people will treat you differently. After you lose a significant amount of weight, especially if, like me, you just grew up overweight, you literally only knew the world through the lens of somebody who was overweight, you can think the world is a pretty ugly place, I guess. I'm not gonna say like people threw rocks at me or anything horrible like that, but the subtle differences after I had lost a lot of weight of how people treated me better, people were nicer to me in general. You know, just like a clerk at a store would be nicer to me than, you know, they had been in the past. The world seemed brighter because people were nicer to me. And that still messes with me to this day, that we seem to be nicer to people that we perceive to be better looking. And we joke about this a lot, actually. Giacomo, my husband, he's exceptionally handsome. And we joke that he lives in a bubble, the beautiful people bubble, where people are just so ridiculously over the top nice to him. If you've ever seen that episode of 30 Rock, Giacomo's that guy. He like walks into Staples and comes out and he's like, they just gave me all of this stuff for free. And I'm like, that doesn't happen to the rest of us. But it just goes to illustrate this fact that yes, when we perceive people to be more attractive, we are nicer to them. And it's so screwed up to me as somebody who lived almost 20 years on the other side of that coin. There were kids that just would not even look twice at me in school, let alone like talk to me or want to be my friend. Suddenly hitting me up for like diet advice 15 years later. Ugh, it gives me the heebie-jeebies, actually. On the flip side of that, you will often find that people who are your friends, family, people that are very close to you, when you start to go in a direction where you're either losing weight or getting healthier or whatever it is that you're trying to do, a lot of times they'll get like sad or upset or defensive or feel like you're abandoning them. You know, if you used to go out for pizza and beer on Friday nights and now that just doesn't line up with your goals, people can feel like you're turning your back on them, and that can put a strain on relationships too. So I don't want to say like, oh, when you lose weight, everybody's so nice to you. That's not what I'm trying to say. It's just there is a palpable shift in the way people treat you because they see you as a different person all of a sudden, even though you're not, which is another point I'm gonna get to in a little bit. The next thing, you're gonna have weeks where the scale doesn't move. You can do everything right and the scale's not gonna move. You can also have weeks where the scale doesn't change, but your body does change. So when you're on this very arduous journey, and it's a hard journey, so always keep that in mind. Those weekly check-ins with yourself or with your coach or whatever, you really, really look forward to those to see how much progress you made that week. And when you met your nutrition goals and did all of your exercise and drank all your water and got all your sleep, and that doesn't change in a week, you can feel like, what's wrong with me? Why am I even bothering doing this when I'm not making any progress? And it can be really disheartening, but that's not the way that weight loss works. It's not the way that fat loss works. It's not linear, but when you're first going through this, see point number one, a lot of times you don't really know exactly what you're doing. So you feel like if that's the only way you can tell you're making progress and you step on the scale and it didn't change, then you didn't make progress. Now I know that's so not true. Sometimes the scale can stay the same for 2, 3, 4 weeks and then suddenly there's a big drop. It's not a linear process, but when you're going through it, it feels like that's the only thing that matters, really. So the next thing has held true to me for a long, long time, ever since this period of time when I started paying attention to what I was eating And way back when I started doing this, the only thing that mattered to me was calories, and I had set a calorie goal for myself, and it was a ridiculous calorie goal. Not even gonna get into it. If you guys ever want to hear about my actual weight loss journey story, let me know. Maybe I'll make that video. I haven't made it because it just seems really self-serving, and I'm all set with that sort of stuff. Unless you guys are interested. Food will stop being just food to you. The same way you can never forget how to ride a bicycle, once you learn the calorie count or the macronutrient count of certain foods, you're not going to unlearn it. You're always going to know it. And on the one hand, I think that's great. You always have these tools in your pocket. You can always reach your goals because the tool is in your head, right? There is a flip side to that, and it's a darker side that you can never see a plate of food. You just see like carbohydrates and fats and protein and macros and numbers and how can I fit this into that? And that's not a healthy place to be either. And one could argue that to achieve any extreme goal, and I have made this argument for bodybuilding, to achieve an extreme goal, sometimes you have to take things to an extreme. And this would be an example of that is, in order to lose weight or lose fat, you need to consume less than you burn. So knowing what you're eating can be very, very important, but it can also become a kind of obsession where when you do want to take a break from it, whether that's eating a higher calorie day or having a free meal or having a free weekend or a diet break, you can't. Like, even when you want to, you can't. And that's when, you know, the red flags start to go up. But again, because a lot of times we go through this without really knowing what we're doing, we can't even see these red flags when they start to go up. So if you do get to a point where food is no longer food, and along with this, you find yourself being afraid of it, you're afraid of pizza, or you're afraid of birthday cake at a birthday party. If you feel fear and anxiety around these sorts of things, those are hopefully just little red flags in the beginning, but left unchecked, those can turn into big red flags. But I think it's more common than not. I think more people that go through a massive weight loss journey are gonna come out of it with some kind of disordered thinking about food. And that is where those red flags start to pop up, is when food stops being just food to you, when you start being afraid of it, little red flags, nip that in the bud right then and there. Along with that, you might start to judge what other people are eating. God, I remember going through this phase. And I must have just been insufferable. Not that I was ever mean about it, but it's kind of like when you first learn about veganism and you just want to tell everybody about, you know, the atrocities that happen, because if they know, then they'll obviously do better, but you know, not always the case. And it's the same thing when you're learning about nutrition. And the funny thing is, again, if you don't really know what you're doing, then you think you know a lot about nutrition, but you probably don't really know that much about nutrition. It's kind of the Dunning-Kruger effect, which we see in the health and fitness industry all the time, which is essentially the less you know about something, the more you think you know about it until you really know a lot about it. And then you realize that there's a lot you don't know about it. One of my favorite phenomenons. But once you start to learn a little bit about nutrition, you suddenly feel like you can tell everybody about this, that, or the other, and you start judging what other people are eating, even though that is literally none of your business. Just like what you're eating is none of anybody else's business. So again, little red flag, catch it early, nip that in the bud. This one was a little bit confusing for me. So I started my journey at about 210, 215 pounds, and eventually my goal weight in my head was 130. And I got there. I got there, and then I said, like, well, now what? I didn't know what to do. I was like, okay, so this is the end? No, there's no finish line. When you're going through some kind of massive transformation, it doesn't even just have to be weight loss. If you're going through any kind of massive physique transformation, you don't just like reach the end and then you can just go back to doing what you were doing before. Like, things have to change forever. And there's no finish line. There's no goal weight. Like, it would be silly to think that your weight is gonna stay the same from now until forever. Weight is gonna go up and down. It fluctuates. Because of that, there's no finish line, and it always takes work. But when you're going through it with this like laser-like goal on the goal weight or whatever, the goal pant size, whatever you decide to set for yourself, once you get there, it's like, okay, now what? And I didn't know what to do back then. And it was actually at that point that things went real sideways for me and took a pretty bad direction. So, and partially the reason that it went sideways is because of this next point, that is, you're gonna look very different than you imagine you're going to look. And this is one of the hardest pills to swallow. When you have a goal weight in your mind, or a goal in your mind, you might go and find pictures of other fitness people or celebrities that are like that, your height and that weight, so you can get an idea of what you're gonna look like when you get there, and you're not gonna look like that when you get there. And it can be so frustrating. And I remember going through like Oxygen magazine and cutting out other gals that were 5'7" that weighed 130 pounds. And I was like, yeah, when I get there, I'm gonna look something like that. And nope. One, a lot of times when you see fitness models, they have years and years and years and years of building muscle. And you're not gonna build a lot of muscle when you're on a massive weight loss journey. You might build a little if you're brand new to lifting, and that's not to be discounted, but it's not gonna be like somebody who's literally put a decade into building muscle. Secondly, if you're like me, and you were overweight your whole life, your body just isn't going to just snap up nice and taut when you reach your goal weight. You're going to be softer than you imagine. The shape is probably not going to be exactly what you hoped for, especially if you weren't strength training. If you weren't strength training, you're just gonna be a smaller version of yourself before, or probably a very similar shape. And a lot of times your skin is going to be kind of squishy and a little bit saggy. And of course, this is different for everybody. Some people just have great skin. And also, if you weren't overweight for that long, you might just snap right back. But you know, I had been overweight since puberty until I was almost 20 years old, and my skin did not bounce back. It was very disappointing to realize I had put in so much work to reach this goal, and I reached it, and it just was not what I expected. So that's not to say that you're not ever going to look the way that you hope. It's that you think you're gonna get there on your first go around, and that's not really the case. I would say it probably took me another 5 or 6 years of working really hard to get to a place where I kind of looked like what I hoped that I would look like. That first reality check was pretty intense. The next one, this sounds so counterintuitive. You would think that if you were obese and then you became much lighter, you made this journey and you worked so hard, that obviously you would like your body more. That's what most people think. That's certainly what I thought. And I should mention, I never hated my body in the first place. I just didn't. I wasn't like super into it, but I wasn't one of those people that just walked around loathing myself at all. And then I started losing a lot of weight, and suddenly my body and the way it looked became more important for me to focus on. And I found that as I got more slender, I actually liked my body less and less. And objectively, I could say, yes, I like the way I look now more than I like the way I looked then. But the feeling was actually worse the better I looked, because the closer I got to my goal, the more I realized how far away the picture in my head actually was. And it was super hard. And this is something that I personally see in my clients like you wouldn't believe. So when I say it's counterintuitive, it sounds backwards. I see it so much. People start with like, you know, almost no level of fitness, and then they change their body so much. They learn so much about nutrition, they eat really well, they exercise really regularly, and objectively, most people would say they look better or look fitter or look whatever in that direction. And they feel significantly worse about themselves because they want to be further than they are. They want to be different than they are. And when you're not putting in a big effort, which before I started on this journey, I was putting in no effort. I never exercised. I never made any effort to eat well. I was vegan, but I didn't know anything about nutrition and I was eating pretty poorly. But I wasn't putting in any effort, so I couldn't feel bad about my results or lack of results. Once you start putting in effort, and this requires tremendous, consistent effort for months and months and months and sometimes years, you get really bummed out when you're not where you want to be yet. And a lot of times people end up with more body image issues after they have big physical transformation than they ever had beforehand. And that's just the 100% truth. The last thing that seems so obvious that I wish somebody had told me before I started my big weight loss journey was that at the end of it, I was still going to be me. And that seems so obvious, right? But a lot of times when we picture this different transformed self physically, we also picture that all of these other things about our personality and our mentality are going to also change for the better, because a lot of times we've been telling ourselves that like, this is wrong because I don't look a certain way, or I'll be happier when I reach this certain goal weight. And it's not true. Any mental issues that you had before you started this are still going to be there. Any things that are wrong with your life, whether it's relationships or your job or your living situation or your own internal monologue with yourself, any kind of depression, anything like that, it's still going to be there. And a lot of times you're going to have to face those sort of demons head on, because you're no longer going to have that comfort of turning to food to alleviate those negative feelings. So a lot of times you'll reach the end of your journey, your goal, your original goal or what have you, and find that you're kind of bummed out, that you're not happier. At the end of the journey, you're still gonna be you. So anything that you need to work on in other arenas of your life, you still need to work on them, because they'll still be there at the end. So it sounds obvious that you'll still be you, but it's an important thing to remember. So anyway, going through any sort of huge physical transformation, it's huge, it's life-changing. And even though some of these sounded really negative, when I look back, it is the biggest thing that ever kick-started the rest of my life, because it really propelled me into the health and fitness lifestyle. And now that is literally my career, is helping other people go through these same kinds of transformations with intelligent nutrition, with intelligent training, and making sure this stays in check. And I think this part is more important than any of it, because without that, you're gonna be in big trouble eventually. So overall, it was a huge positive in my life, but there were a lot of missteps that I wish I could have avoided. Anyway, folks, that's all I have for you today. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them in the comments down below, and we will talk to you next week. Bye.